Welcome to the show, everyone. Happy Blue Friday to Seahawks fans. And as we get ready for the Seahawks to host the Kansas City Chiefs tonight on a rainy night in Lumen Field, we do expect the starters to play. Mike McDonald told us they will. He didn't tell us for how long, which means we'll see a little bit of Sam Darnold tonight. We're going to talk about quarterbacks today, including Sam Darnold. Mike Sando of The Athletic and the New York Times is joining me today to talk about his annual quarterback tiers piece, where executives, head coaches, position coaches around the league give their input and insight into the quarterbacks in the NFL, and then they are organized into tiers. Where do Sam Darnold and Geno Smith fall? They might be closer together than you think. Mike Sando joining me on the other side. This is Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
My apologies right off the top for sounding like Kermit the Frog or whatever I sound like. I've been battling a pretty nasty sinus infection the last couple of days, but wasn't going to keep me from talking to Mr. Sando again here today. Joined us last year to talk about his quarterback tiers, and he is back today to do the same. And then stick around till the end of the show after the conversation I had with Mike. I'm going to go over Dan Orlovsky's rankings earlier this week, where he ranked all the quarterbacks in the league by traits, top 10 in each key trait. I have some thoughts on that as well. So focusing on the quarterbacks today from start to finish. If you would, please hit that thumbs up button on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. If you like what I do, hit that bell for notification of future content. If you prefer the written word, I have a Substack. Check that out. It's free until week 2 of the regular season. And then also, if you prefer audio podcasts, I am available anywhere you get your podcasts. Be sure to hit follow or subscribe there and leave a rating or a review if you like what I do. And I am a full-time independent content creator, so all the other ways you can support me are listed and linked down below in the description. All right. Without further ado, Mike Sando of The Athletic talking quarterback tiers. Where's Sam Darnold fall in all of this? You're about to find out. Mike, thank you so much again for joining the show. It's always good to have you. This is how many QB tier pieces now?
This is the 12th one this year. Yeah.
Was there anything about this one that stood out to you above the rest as being interesting?
I always like to see what's happening with tier one, so if you go back to maybe 2019, I think there were 8 players in tier one. And if you go back to then, Brady's playing and Roethlisberger and Rivers and Matt Ryan, there's just a lot of veteran quarterbacks. And of course, Mahomes was going strong at that point. And Deshaun Watson, was hot at that time. And I think what happened, we got down to last season, there were only 3 in tier one, and we had the youngest starters in the league since like the 1950s, something like that. So there's been a big changeover. And this year, the tier one expanded a little. I mean, Lamar Jackson finally got in there. And then Matthew Stafford just kind of inched over the line. And I don't know if we did it again right now with his back injury, I don't know if he would. But then we've got a couple other guys that may, still Jaden Daniels may get there, but back then, I was looking at 2020, like tier 2 was like Brady and Roethlisberger and Rivers and Ryan and all these guys. Wow. And like tier 2 now is a bunch of young guys. So I think the league has changed, and I'm always kind of fascinated by that, and then there was a few other things like, the discourse around Caleb Williams was pretty negative this year, and it was pretty positive around most of the other rookies from the 2024 class. I thought that was definitely stood out to me.
Now, of course, all my viewers are going to want to know about their current quarterback and their most recent quarterback, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith.
Yeah.
And let them know where these guys ended up getting placed, because they're actually very close together, aren't they?
Yeah, they're right in the middle of tier 3. And Geno's always kind of been gets all 3s, even when it seemed like he should get more 2s. People think he's a 3. And a 3 is basically, hey, a legitimate starter. But probably to win more defense and run game. And I think you could say Geno overcame, Geno, not this last season, but the year before, the defense wasn't very good and they had a decent record. And I thought he was a huge reason why. But that being said, the Seahawks also let him go. And that tells you everything you need to know, because all those guys in tier 2 are like not guys that their teams are. They're all getting the big contracts. So maybe that affirms that he actually is a tier 3, which is still, a solid player, but you're probably you know, to be in tier 3 and win the Super Bowl or get there, like, I think you'd have to be really spectacular around the player. Whereas I feel like in tier 1 or tier 2, you feel like you're in the mix, most years with your guy if your team's pretty well run.
Now, Geno experienced a resurgence a couple of years ago, getting his first opportunity again after the Russell Wilson trade to be a full-time starter after sitting for years. Sam got to experience that kind of in full last year. I mean, he got some opportunities in Carolina before his 1 year in San Francisco, but he certainly made an impression last year. Here is your this is the difference. And there you see it, Sam Darnold right there at the very top as gaining the most ground this year in the tiers. What was kind of the overwhelming sentiment? We'll get into his capsule here in a second.
Yeah.
Sort of the main push of those you talked to moving him up the board.
Yeah, I mean, you had to based on how he played. But I think the last 2 games, where it didn't look so good, it looked bad, in fact, against the Rams, just sort of left a bad taste in people's mouths and probably took away some of the excitement of, hey, if he had finished strong and maybe if they win in the playoffs, maybe the Vikings keep him. That's a possibility too. But I think there's probably a lot of people who liked Darnold coming out of college. And if he had put an exclamation point on last season, I think he would be at the top of tier 3, maybe instead of in the middle of it. But I thought there were fascinating quotes about him. Maybe you want to get into some of those, but
Yeah, absolutely.
It's telling to me that he and Geno came in at about the same spot. Now, one of the things that people think Geno's better at is the 2-minute drill and leading your
Right.
team down the field. And I agree with that. I think that Darnold, although it wasn't 2 minutes, but it was late in Seattle. Remember, he hit the big touchdown pass, I think, in the final 4 minutes to win the game. That was pretty cool. But, that's an area I think where Geno was pretty good, probably better than his tier 3 standing. He was probably a top half of the league guy in 2 minute, and Darnold has to prove that. So we'll see how much they're in that type of a situation. I think they're going to run the ball a lot more, and they're going to, try to control the games with that and their defense, and maybe they won't have to be in a bunch of those situations.
It's interesting that they made so much out of the 2-minute stuff because Darnold was far superior to Geno in the red zone, especially last year.
Yeah. Yeah, Geno in the red zone was really confounding. I think there's a feeling on Geno that, he's probably more of a gunslinger all the time, and that it catches up to him, that there's not quite enough upside in that for you to want to roll with that forever. And I thought one of the most fascinating things was like that somebody put up the quote, like Geno might be a better bad team quarterback, and you got it right there. That's fascinating to me because you would think like, hey, Minnesota was a pretty good team, and Darnold with on same page with his coordinator, with the best receiver in the league, arguably, and Justin Jefferson, a good defense they've had there for a couple of years. Hey, you plug in Sam Darnold and he looks good with that group. Now, when you've seen him on bad teams, it like he couldn't stay above water, right? Whereas Geno maybe on some teams that weren't expected to do as well or had bad defenses, that gunslinging maybe helped him get by. But you're also going to lose some games that you thought you should have won. I thought that was interesting. I don't know that I buy it all the way. I think Darnold can be turnover prone too.
Yeah, we've seen that certainly. There's even been moments of it in camp. He has a lot of confidence in his arm, and he tries to get the ball into some tight spots sometimes. And I went back at one point and we tracked all of his interceptions from last year, and they all had one thing in common: they weren't bad reads, they weren't bad decisions. They were just him trying to put the ball where he shouldn't try to put the ball. Is all.
And so some of that too is, he's more familiar with this offense than the teammates. So, there's probably a little bit of a getting on the same page thing here, because obviously he's been with Clint Kubiak before. The rest of the team hasn't. So I would imagine we could see him. I think we probably already have. He's probably looked a little bit better more lately than he did earlier, just as the rest of the team gets up to speed.
Yeah, that quote certainly tracks. I've been making the argument for years whenever the Geno detractors would come at me that, the Seahawks don't win 29 games over the last 3 years without that guy. So,
I agree.
Let's look a little closer at him because I find it fascinating that the narrative from here anyway feels like it's shifted somewhat this offseason. Sometimes when somebody else wants you, I think it changes some people's perceptions. And suddenly, in a lot of those offseason lists before this one came out, where quarterbacks are ranked, Geno seemed to be skyrocketing up those, right? Whereas last year and the years he was in Seattle, you had to convince people he was good. But now we're talking about executives and coaches, and they don't, they get a closer look. Obviously, pretty good at everything, but nothing stands out as an elite trait at the top of the list here. Did anything surprise you about what anyone said about Geno?
Other than the one about being a better bad team quarterback, I hadn't heard that before. I thought that was a new one, but I knew, I was surprised maybe 2 years ago that he didn't get more twos. I thought he was pretty good. I can understand it after last season, and look, it's not all his fault because they insisted on throwing the ball from the shotgun in five-man protections when they couldn't protect in that situation. And Geno was in a tough spot, I think, with that. I think Sam Darnold is going to be protected more this year, both by the scheme largely, and also by a couple upgrades on the offensive line. If it's true that Abe Lucas is going to be back and strong, and they've made drafted a first-round pick, on the interior offensive line, I think he's going to have. It may not be a fair comparison last year Geno to this year Darnold. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a better fit of scheme to quarterback, what they have here than what Geno had last year, for sure.
Now, I also think that the Raiders have probably raised their floor as much as any team in the league this season by replacing Antonio Pierce with Pete Carroll and Aiden O'Connell with Geno Smith. I mean, those are big upgrades. I don't know where it gets you in the end. I think they'll be competitive, but I don't know that it's going to make them contend even anytime soon. I don't know. They may still be looking for a guy, and I think that's what Seattle was up against in the end with Geno too.
This may be a hard question to answer because we're probably going to see an evolved version of him. But what do you make of the matchup of Chip Kelly being Geno Smith's play caller and coordinator?
Totally fascinated by the staff with the Raiders, because I bet you that if Pete Carroll had his way going in, that we'd see Gus Bradley coordinating the defense. We'd see Darrell Bevel. We'd see the band back together again. That's what I think.
Tried to do that for a moment.
Yeah, and so it looked to me like there was some other people in the building influencing what direction they go. And I think that on paper is great. I think one of the issues with Pete at the end in Seattle was, he could have used, a reinvigorated staff with some different people. And we see that happen with longtime coaches in places a lot of the times. It happened with Mike Holmgren. You keep your buddies the whole time, and then by the end that you got your buddies, and the other guys all took off for who could get promoted, right? And that's
Right.
not the way you want to be. But it also has to fit well. Like we saw last year, Mike McDonald and Ryan Grubb, not a great fit, right? So Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly could be a great fit, but I think it's a new fit. So I'll be very interested to see how that's going. Chip Kelly's got his own ideas. He's been a head coach in the NFL and college, kind of has his own identity that he has carved out. And Pete very much has his identity. So maybe those identities, overlap a lot, but they're going to have to, and it's going to end up going Pete Carroll's way. And I think Pete, in Seattle wasn't afraid to take the reins of the offense, right? I mean, we saw the famous year when they, took the reins away from Russell Wilson and they became like a historically slanted towards the run. How's that going to work with Chip Kelly, who's, is he as pliable as some of the guys that Pete had under him before?
Yeah, and I did find it fascinating. It was in pure, true Pete Carroll form that about a week and a half ago, how much he was talking up Aiden O'Connell, and he's everything you want in a quarterback, and just always got to keep that competition going, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, maybe raise his value.
One more thing here. I thought this really stood out from Sam's little thumbnail there. This is an executive saying, I think Sam starts 1 year and they go with the young kid, referring to 2025 third-round pick Jalen Milroe. It's a fascinating situation. Usually when a quarterback is drafted that a team views as a future franchise quarterback, the starter, then the incumbent or whoever they bring in is viewed as a bridge. That's not the narrative we're getting here, and that's not the vibe from Seahawks camp. They really like Sam, and the best option is always that guy plays well, right?
Yeah.
From what you're hearing and just from what you understand, How well does Sam Darnold have to play to hold off Milroe, or does it have to do more with Milroe's development and him just announcing when he's ready?
Yeah, I think that how the team goes, right? I mean, if you're losing games and Sam Darnold is, not playing that great, I mean, eventually there's probably going to be a change. Now, the other guy has to be ready. I feel like they felt, years ago that Russell Wilson was ready. They knew in camp, like, shoot, this guy could start the season. I don't think it's quite to there with Jalen Milroe, although I think they've been very happy with him, and I think he checks a lot of the boxes in terms of just being a guy, right? And his preparation and all of that. And so I think he is going to come along and develop. I think they didn't take Milroe because they want him to replace Darnold necessarily in a year. I think they just want to increase their chances of having found a good quarterback, right?
Mm.
And so, John Schneider has spoken for years about coming from Green Bay. They always, Ron Wolf used to always take a quarterback. That's hard to do when Pete Carroll's there in the draft room and needs a safety, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this year, with John Schneider, being more in charge of the draft, they made a Schneider type of a move. Hey, I want to get this. There's a quarterback I like, right?
Yeah.
Because there's
Yeah.
been other times. I mean, shoot, Schneider wanted Andy Dalton, but they ended up taking, I think, James Carpenter because maybe Tom Cable really wanted to have a tackle or something like that. Which these things happen in every building all the time. Doesn't mean it was a bad decision necessarily, but I think Schneider is less encumbered here now, right? He doesn't have a 50-year coaching veteran who has the final say in personnel like Pete did. So that, to me, is why it was easier to take a quarterback where they did. And now hey, if he wins it or if he's the best guy, they can play him. They can do that, but they don't have to force it. They got two guys they probably like.
Certainly a position that's better to have options at. I know I only have you for a couple more minutes. Can we take a quick run through the rest of the division?
Yeah.
Always fascinated by the views on Brock Purdy, and this one didn't disappoint. A lot of mixed signals from executives and coaches. Seems to be a pretty polarizing player. And now he's gotten paid, right? And so I think that skews some people's views of him, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, look, one of the great quotes in there was like, hey, the draft is over, because he's Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick. The draft is over. This guy has played his ass off. Recognize that, and I get that. At the same time, I think when you look higher in tier 2 and see guys like Justin Herbert or Jaden Daniels, you see different types of players and athletes. You can see why those guys were picked earlier, right? And so I think in San Francisco, you're always going to deal with the fact that Kyle Shanahan gets good production out of these guys, and no one is going into the game with San Francisco going, "Oh my gosh, we got to play Purdy." It's not like that, but you respect him. He runs the offense well, but you're more worried about McCaffrey, right? You're the Shanahan scheme. What are they going to dial up? You know that Purdy can execute it. He's a good quarterback, but I think tier 2 is perfect for him, and to rise up in tier 2, this year he probably would have had to have helped them be better than 6-11 last year. He couldn't quite do that, and that's fine. That's reasonable. It's hard to do when the team's falling apart around you, but maybe a higher tiered quarterback would have been able to do that. I always come back to this with that scheme. If you go through and look at the all-time NFL history leaders in yards per pass attempt, it's Hall of Famer, Garoppolo, Hall of Famer, Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? And so that always is in your mind of like, okay, we know Purdy's pretty good, but like, Tua has been pretty good with the same scheme as well, right? And we know that Tua has some limitations. So he is going to fight against that. And I think low tier 2 is fine for him.
And then Kyler Murray, it's mentioned in here that he's just kind of stuck. He doesn't really move up or down from one year to the next. I feel like with Kyler, every offseason, the narrative is, well, this is the year. This is the year he takes the next step. Why aren't we seeing that next step?
Yeah. Well, I think he does have some limitations physically, obviously, with his height. Another thing that's been really worked against him that he doesn't control is they've been really bad on defense. I think, 2 years ago, they were 32nd in EPA per play on defense. I think last year they were 23rd. They poured a bunch into that this offseason with their draft. I think their first 5 picks. And then in free agency, they got a Sweat from the Eagles and Tomlinson, another big guy inside. So they have to make that jump to like 12 on defense. If they do that, I think Kyler can be the same guy and it would be easier for him. And hey, if he plays good in 6 games like he seems to do every year, maybe that's enough for them to win 9 games, right? I just don't see the
Yeah.
consistent. I think it's hard to be consistent when you can't be consistent from the pocket. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
he struggles to be consistent from the pocket because of his size. So he's electric running around, but that's hard to be consistent with. And so I think that's the biggest challenge for him. And then we know, early in his career that he wasn't studying enough, and everyone laughed about it, but
Mhm.
there was a reason that clause that you have to study was in his contract. Do we think now he's improved? Probably. Do we think now he's all over it and completely dedicated like uh, like some of these upper tier quarterbacks are? Probably not. He's probably not. So there's probably just a hole or two there that prevents him from really going up. And now we'll see if they get the defense better. I think the perceptions of him could improve too because they'll win more.
This quote at the very end, I still don't trust him. A GM said he has 2 talent, but is still a 3 to me. He always tends to tail off as the season goes on. I would even shrink that down more into a game by game basis. If you and
As the game goes on.
Seahawks got him twice last year, and it was if you get on him early, you hit him, and things don't go well for him early, he just seems to kind of shrink.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. And just some head scratching kind of panic interceptions, that sort of a thing. So I was looking like a few years ago for something else, and he was like the top guy in tier 3 then.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Now,
I think at a certain point you sort of are what you are.
right. Speaking of head scratchers, it's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact this is the first time Matt Stafford has ever appeared in tier 1.
We should go back and vote right now after he's been injured with his back. I don't know if
Yeah.
he'd still
Yeah.
be up
Right.
there, but really he's been super high tier 2 a long time. I think last year had 21 tier 1 votes. You need to get at least 25 to get into tier 1. This year he got 26. So he got 5 more tier 1 votes. But remember, did half my panel change, right? Or do I have 20 new guys every year? Probably. So I
Yeah.
could have just had, there could just be a little variance there where he moved across the border into tier 1 without really moving that far. And I think that's what happened with him.
Yeah. Right there at the bottom. There's really nothing. He's a 1. He's that good. They're a play away from the NFC Championship game last year. I don't know where the Matt Stafford hate comes from. Maybe it's just because of the area of the country I live in and he's a rival. But I've always thought if you're just talking pure arm talent, there's no question he's tier 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yep. And now he's just got to stay in the field. I think the age and injuries, durability are the biggest concern right now. And for a good reason. He's got a back problem.
I mean, I was shocked that the Rams didn't address quarterback in this year's draft. I thought there were some interesting guys later on they could have gotten some value with as far as draft capital goes that might have been a good match for that offense. They make a mistake, perhaps, in
I mean,
hindsight.
maybe, but I think that Sean McVay likes Jimmy G. So, that could be what it is. They didn't want to muddy it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Final question for you, because I know you got to go. I threw this up here too, because I know Seahawk fans still follow his career. Is this Russ's last opportunity to start in this league?
Probably for for week 1. I mean, if he wants to hang around, is there a role for him? Would he even want to do that? Maybe, but I think they drafted a quarterback in the first round. We know that he's no longer special with the things that he could do moving around. So I would think over the course of time in that city where it's hard to hide, we've seen, people struggle. Even Rodgers, didn't really get it going in that area. So I have a hard time thinking Russell can play well enough, consistently enough to hold off a first round pick. When remember the regime there maybe has to show they've got a guy behind him. I don't know if Dart's going to be ready either, but that's kind of how I see it going. And then going into next year is he's a veteran, but I see him as nothing more than a bridge.
Mike, it's always good to have your time. I'm looking forward to having you back on next year when we can talk about Sam Darnold being a tier 1 quarterback.
Hey, thanks so much.
Thanks, Mike.
Appreciate it.
All right. And then I just quickly wanted to go over this as well. I really like the work that Dan Orlovsky does. And so this one caught my eye earlier this week. So this is ranking NFL quarterbacks by trait. And he goes, it's about 5 or 6 traits: arm strength, ball placement, mechanics, decision-making with the football, pocket presence, rushing ability, and second reaction ability. So spoiler alert, I'll just get this out of the way right now. Sam Darnold doesn't show up in any of these top 10 lists, but that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to look at it is as we approach this year and as we work through this year, does he have an opportunity to get onto a couple of these lists? Arm strength, To me, arm strength is one of those things that's really tough to judge watching tape. There are guys that I see on tape that I don't think have a strong arm, and then I'll hear people in the know talk about what a gun they have. I think some of it, when you're watching tape, is skewed by their mechanics, by their delivery. Sometimes if the delivery's a little long, it looks like the ball is traveling slower and vice versa. He's got Josh Allen, number one. I mean, I think that's a pretty easy one. And some of this is also cachet and accomplishment too, right? Like Anthony Richardson isn't on this list, although if you stacked him up and lined him up in a combine type competition with all the other quarterbacks in the league, you could probably throw it farther. I think we kind of saw that in the combine. But he's got Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, Jackson, Stafford. I mean, the typical, the usual suspects, although pretty cool to see Michael Penix here at number 9 before he's even played a full season. Good on him, the kid from UW. Now, here's one where I think Sam Darnold is going to have an opportunity to make a statement this year with another good season. It's ball placement. Now, Geno's on this list. He's at number 10. Burrow's number 1. Jaden Daniels in just his second year, number 2. That's pretty fascinating. And then you've got, Jackson, Allen, Mahomes. And even for Jackson to be 3 on this one, that's pretty remarkable for him. It just continues to show, he made it into tier 1 this year in that quarterback tier list. And some of the comments from coaches and executives around the league were that he finally got there. Like the passing has progressed to the point that now we view him in that light. Stafford, Tagovailoa, Purdy, Mayfield, and then Smith. The ball placement day in and day out that I've seen from Sam Darnold in this camp is elite. Rarely does a receiver have to move off of his target spot. And the ball's there sometimes before the receiver makes a cut. It's just his ball placement's really good. And I know practice is one thing and games are another. Geno wouldn't have been on this list 3 years ago. So maybe just another good, solid season from Sam, and he'll make this list, because I certainly think his ball placement is as good as, I'd say, the guys in the bottom third of this list. Mechanics, I feel like his mechanics are sound too. Geno's at 7 here. I think it'd be interesting to talk to Bryce Coots on this one. Maybe I'll just kind of revisit this the next time he's on the show, the old quarterback coach. But I would argue that Geno's mechanics are very, very close to Geno's. I mean, Sam's are. Did I say Geno? Geno's are close to Geno. Sam's are close to Geno's. But certainly, I like Sam's mechanics better than Jared Goff. So we'll see if he makes some inroads on that list in future years as well. Decision-making with the football, Sam's always had a tendency to throw more interceptions than some guys. He does try to fit the ball into tight windows at times, have a little too much confidence in his arm. Found it interesting that Bo Nix made this list. I think it's pretty easy to make decisions, and no shade on Nix. I really like him. But and I know that as the year progressed, they started taking more downfield shots. But for much of the season in that offense, they were pretty conservative with him. I think it's pretty easy to be viewed as a good decision maker if you're not taking as many chances. And so maybe this category hurts some of the gunslingers. But then Joe Burrow's at the top, so followed by Josh Allen. So maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about. Pocket presence, Geno's there. I was glad to see him make this list. I think his ability to manipulate the pocket has grown over the 3 years he was the starter in Seattle. I think it's one of his great strengths now, and it's what really helped him to navigate some of those offensive line issues the last few years and really, really make some plays when things are breaking down. Would like to see a step forward from Sam in this category this year as well. And here's one where I think Sam can really make his mark. And again, I think it just might have to do with another year of doing it. For Caleb Williams to show up on this list after a rookie year, like he kind of had to run a lot last year, right? Because the passing game just wasn't really working there. Brock Purdy can manage a game with his feet a little bit, and when you're least expecting it, he hurts you. I think Sam, I would put him on this list I think he has the ability to get as high as 8 if all else stayed the same here. I think I'd put him ahead of Justin Herbert for sure. Sam's a better athlete. I think he's faster, he's quicker. And I think in this offense, he's going to have the freedom to do that. And they're going to tell him, look, if it's not there and you get to 2 in your head on your internal clock, go. If it's there, go. Use your legs. I think he's going to be encouraged to do that. And that's going to give him an opportunity to move up on this list. And then second reaction ability. This is something that will be under heavy scrutiny and focus early in the season, as there might be some growing pains from this newly formed and remodeled offensive line and coaching staff on that side of the ball. But this is something that might be one of the biggest knocks on Sam, is that decision-making ability if things are muddy, if things are messy. So let's see if he can take a step when it comes to that as well. All right. Thanks for getting through that one with me. I feel as crappy as I sound. Let's put it that way. It's not going to keep me from the game tonight. Rain, sickness, the best ability is availability, right? And gosh darn it, I'm going to be there so I can react to it for y'all. Because it's such a late game, I will not be able to react right after the game, so I will do that tomorrow. Look forward to that. Coming up next week on the show, Warren Sharp is going to be joining me to go over his NFL preview this year, done from a very heavy analytical point of view. And then I'm really excited about this. Next Wednesday, E.J. Snyder from Bootleg Football is going to join me. I've had Brett Coleman on the show. Really looking forward to talking to E.J. He's got a soft spot for the Seahawks, so we're going to get into some of that, as the Seahawks will be heading to Green Bay at that time for their joint practice with the Packers. Did you notice the edit there? Yeah, it's because I had a coughing attack. So I'm going to go. I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. Thank you so much for watching. All the ways you can support the show are listed and linked down below. Forever and always go Hawks. Really appreciate the view, the listen, the like. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.